We'll be mindful of the time. If we have a couple late stragglers, so be it. I'm Robert Sorensen. I'm your Director of Sports and Wellness. Over this season, I've given a series of lectures on longevity. Today's happens to be on the concept of the Centenarian Decathlon, truly your Centenarian Decathlon, because each one of you is going to experience that aging process a little bit differently. And before we get into it, we get stuck on one word there. We get stuck on centenarian, 100. Not all of us in this room are going to live to 100. Some of us may. Some of us may live to 100 at a very high capacity. Some of us may live to 100 at a very low capacity. What's more important is the term marginal decade. So if you're unfamiliar with the term marginal decade, that's your last decade of life. That could be in your 70s, 80s, or 90s, or over 100. Could be earlier than that. Hopefully not. But the driver in that is focus on where, based on your knowledge of your family history, how you feel right now, what that marginal decade may be, and that's kind of what we're training towards. So I myself, my family history is very, very bad. On my father's side, nobody has, he is now the oldest at 78 years old. His parents died early, his brothers died early. So my marginal decade might be in my 70s. It might be in my 80s. It really depends on lifestyle. Very similar on my mother's side. So know your family history and take that with a grain of salt as you go through this practice of planning for your Centenarian Decathlon. So as we have with the other lectures, we start with the purpose. Why? Why are we here? Why are we listening? Why are we interested? Hopefully that's because you want to live longer and you want to live healthier. And that concept of squaring the curve continues to come up in literature, a more commonplace in conversation. We want to live at that very, very high capacity. We want to hit our peak. We want to maintain at that peak for as long as possible. And then we want to drop over dead. We don't want to live with the presence of disease. We don't want to go through that slow, steady decline over time. We want our time to, ideally, we're enjoying everything that we know and love. We reach that point where we can no longer do some of those things, and then we have a very rapid decline, whether that's a single traumatic event or if that's something that just happens to transpire medically. But what I do with these longevity lectures is I dig into the science, dig into what research is telling us, try to break down that information into something a little bit more digestible, then bring it to you all for discussion. So where have we been and where are we going? This is the fourth now in our series. In January, we focused on sleep, that foundation of health. We focused on fasting, how that can help with cellular regeneration. And then last month, we focused on hydration. All of these lectures are recorded and available. We'll do one last email blast out after this one's recorded and uploaded, just so that you have those as a reference point. But now we go to something that's a little bit more near and dear to my heart, something a little bit more approachable, is we bring into the foundation of movement with the Centenarian Decathlon, because so much of that is based on what we do every single day related to movement, activity, and exercise. So when you leave these doors, what you'll learn today, or my hopes of what you'll learn today, is how to train for your Centenarian Decathlon. Again, the person next to you is going to go through it completely different. That doesn't mean your goals have to be different, but how you respond or plan for those goals are going to be, because we're all biologically different people, and we have different personalities, and we have different emotions and reactions to things. So I'll share what that Centenarian Decathlon is. Well, I'll help you define what your goals might look like for this concept, and a sample framework of how to work towards those goals. And then what's important is how to measure progress towards them. Because if we're not measuring, then we have no idea if we're doing the right thing. If we're going into the gym without a plan, day after day after day, it's kind of that definition of insanity. If we're not seeing improvement, how are we measuring that improvement? If you don't have a response for that, that's where I can come into play and really help you out with that. So I want you to turn internal, and I want to ask yourself a question. If I live to 100, or again, that marginal decade, that last decade that you aspire to be on Earth, what do I need to be physically able to do to enjoy my life? And we focus on the physically able because there are so many studies that show if you are physically able to do what you want to do, enjoy, and love, then the emotional aspect, the mental aspect will come along with that. Because there is so much enjoyment, especially within this room, of being able to do those physical components as a community. We pickleball together, we tennis together, we golf together, we fitness together. All of those things. You probably have some of the best conversations when you're physically active. So if we can continue to do those things, you're going to keep having those conversations. So now everybody has their answer, right? Perfect. Next, I want you to ask yourself, what physical tasks would support those goals? Or maybe, what are you doing right now physically to help support those goals? This is where it gets a little bit gray, because not everyone has the same education in exercise science or progressions, but there is a proper way to structure and format your activities of daily living, your physical activity, to support what you want to be able to do. So if your goal was, I want to be able to pick up my great-grandchild, I want to be able to run downstairs, get on the floor with him Christmas morning until I'm 95 years old, lift him up high, and swing him around. We need to do movements that mimic that activity. Training could be a goblet squat. This is something that I see many, many people do in the gym. What this image has is a gentleman holding a dumbbell right at his chest. He's in that bottom squat position. What does this look like? Grandchild, come over here. Now I'm going to pick you up. We are training then to emulate what we hope to be able to do. And then we get into the whole rationale of what should the weight of the goblet squat be? How many repetitions should we be doing? How many sets of that should we be doing? The reality of it is you all are going to have a much easier time training for this now than I'm going to have time to train for this, because you are already closer to that position. I have to maintain that capacity for a much longer window than each of you do. So you have a leg up on me in that regard. But that doesn't change that progression-wise, everyone in this room, whether it's a goblet squat, whether it's time on the treadmill, time on the bike, there should be some level of advancement in how we're exercising, because that's what's going to allow you to be able to do this for a very, very long window of time. And we'll dig in a little bit more to strength and power and progression a little bit deeper into the slides. So the framework to train towards your Centenarian Decathlon, or what you aspire to still be able to do in your marginal decade, starts with a framework of focusing on specific components of fitness, because fitness is what allows us to keep doing those things that we want to physically be able to do for a very long window of time. And there are 4 components that really drop into this bucket. The first is stability, or generally control of the body. Stability could be interchanged with balance. It could be interchanged with mobility, but it is somewhere in that world of being able to control your body, being able to react how we want to react. Reaching for a low shot, extending up for a serve. How are we maintaining our shoulder health to be able to do that? How are we maintaining our balance, our footing position to be able to do those things? Stability should be a component of everyone in this room's fitness program. Mobility, flexibility, balance. Strength, your ability to produce force. We need to be doing something that is adding purposeful stress to the body so that we keep our tendons and our ligaments and our muscles strong. If you are doing 5 pounds on any exercise today, if I came back to you 2 months from now and you were still doing that same 5-pound movement, we're not progressing effectively because the body has adapted to that. You always do what you always done, you always get what you've always got. Unfortunately, we have this thing that's called age that comes into play that limits many, many different things, primarily how we respond to being able to move weight. So don't be afraid to increasing weight on machines, dumbbells, resistance bands, whatever that happens to be. And there are many ways that we can approach that. Aerobic, we need to go long. You need to dedicate time during your week, during your fitness program, in which you're exercising a longer duration at an elevated heart rate. Zone 2, Zone 3 training, that's something that is very common speak at this point in time, especially if you listen to people like Dr. Peter Attia. He's somebody who preaches Zone 2 training. What that essentially is exercising at an elevated heart rate, somewhere where you could still hold a conversation, but it's not very comfortable to hold a conversation. That's something that you should be doing for upwards of 45, 60 minutes. Walking around the Corso is a really easy way to do that. Not just walking, but a brisk walk. Now, I also love seeing so many people in weight vests or rucking, which helps add load. So we add load to the joints. And by adding that load to the joints and exercising, we get a little elevation in heart rate. We work in that kind of Zone 2 modality. But we don't just need to go long. We also need to go hard. So there needs to be anaerobic work incorporating into your fitness regimen. Your anaerobic work is that high intensity exertion. That's that breathlessness feeling that you can only maintain for a short window of time before needing to take a rest. That could be 2 minutes of work, 4 minutes of rest. That could be 4 minutes of work, 4 minutes of rest. Just something that puts you at a very high capacity. You should not be able to hold a conversation when you're focusing on your anaerobic work. And again, all 4 of these things we'll speak a little bit more in depth about. Now, every movement or action we do requires at least one of these. Most of our activities that we want to be able to continue to do takes multiple of these. So let's go back to our example of goblet squat. We need to have strength because we need to pick up our grandchild. We need to have stability because we need to be able to get down and find our balance. And then to an extent, we also need anaerobic, which is a very high level of effort, a very quick exertion to stand up with him. Instead of that slow movement, we want to actually be able to move with a little bit of urgency. So simple example, 3 components of fitness right there that all contribute into it, really influencing that point that we need to train all of these areas. So I'm going to do a quick rapid fire of some examples of these goals that you might set for yourself to kind of get the gears turning. Some of these are my own, some of these are borrowed, but it's really going to paint that picture of multiple areas in that framework contributing towards what I would think that we want to be able to do. Pick up a 30-pound child from a squatted position, strength and stability, we spoke about that one. Get up off the floor using 1 point of assistance. This requires, again, strength and stability. To put that in perspective, if we fall and there's nothing around us to support helping us get back up and out of danger, I want to be able to do that using just my legs and 1 extra point of assistance. What if I fall and I hurt my arm? I can rely on the other. That's a goal of mine to be able to maintain for a very long time. Place a 30-pound suitcase overhead. We're all travelers. We want to be able to lift and place in the overhead compartment. Nobody wants to be that person who asks for help. If you've had shoulder surgery, I've been on planes many times with shoulder surgeries. We are independent people. Let's focus on what we can do to maintain that. Dead hang position for 30 seconds. So a dead hang position would be my arms are up and overhead. I'm just able to hold my body weight for 30 seconds. Think about areas where you might be in danger and have to do that sort of thing. I don't want to have to wonder if my shoulders are going to be able to maintain that position. I want to know that I'm training to be able to maintain that. Farmer walk for 1 minute with 25% of my body weight in each hand. So farmer walk is essentially holding a weight in each arm, carrying your groceries, carrying your luggage. 25% of your body weight, if you can do that for 1 minute, you're pretty dang sure that you're going to be able to keep carrying your groceries in independently. That's something that you can practice with dumbbells. That's something that you can practice with kettlebells in the gym. That is in the strength and anaerobic capacity because it does take a high level of exertion to carry that level of weight. Pull or push a weighted sled. We do have a sled out on our back patio. 100 feet with some level of resistance or weight. Strength or anaerobic capacity. You or a loved one falls over. You're in a spot of danger. I want to know that I can drag that or push that person out of danger. You look to your left, you look to your right, you probably know somebody who's been in a car accident before. It's likely that person may have had to assist that person out of a danger area. I want to know that I can help my spouse, my best friend, a stranger. Walk up and down stairs with feet pointed forward. Stability. Feet pointed forward, if you're walking upstairs this way, that tells me that we have very, very good ankle stability, ankle mobility. So when we are, again, traveling around the world, those cobblestone walkways, the pathways built in the 14th, 15th, 16th century, that shouldn't be a problem to navigate. Single-legged stance with eyes open for 30 seconds, single-leg stance with eyes closed for 30 seconds. Again, stability, balance. Great way to do this, great opportunity to practice when the microwave is running, when you're brushing your teeth. We have to do those things every single day. We might as well incorporate something training related during that time. Get out of a chair unassisted. Again, strength and anaerobic. We go from seated, we go to standing, lower body dominant. Cover 3 miles by foot in under an hour. That would be that anaerobic zone. Walking the Corso. If we're going on trips and traveling, we don't want to think about, is there somewhere that I'm going to need to sit down? Is there a bench on the way? Because most of our travel, we may never have been there before. We have no frame of reference. Train so that you don't have to worry about those things. Carry 20 pounds up 4 flights of stairs. Groceries going up. Something happens, you're staying in a hotel, you have to get something down the stairs or you have to get something back up the stairs. The hotel doesn't have an elevator. We want to be able to rely on ourselves to do these things. I think we've got maybe 1 or 2 more. Maintain a VO2 max, and we'll get more into VO2 max above 30. If you can maintain a VO2 max, and this is something that we brought in somebody to do some testing on over the last couple weeks, we'll look to do that again in the fall. If you can maintain that number over 30, there is just about any activity that you could want to do that you can still do. When we see that number drop below 30, then we have shortness of breath issues, then we have capacity issues. 30 is kind of that sweet spot. And then tread water for 10 minutes. Hopefully we never have to do that, but that is something that is a goal of mine to be able to continue to do. And pull myself out of the pool and onto the pool deck. So let's break down each area. So stability, your ability to control your body, whether you're standing still or moving. This is the area of physical capacity that begins to decline the quickest and the earliest over the aging process when compared to all other components of fitness. Stability, if we're talking about progressing or making these trainings a little bit more advanced, we usually start in what's called a static position. Static position would be feet flat on the floor. We're keeping our body static or in place. A progression from that would be to a dynamic movement. So doing balance, whether that again is I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 steps and hold, 1, 2, 3 steps and hold. Now we've incorporated balance plus movement. This is how your training should be. And then wherever and whenever possible, let's consider functional training that mimics those activities that we want to be able to continue to do. Think about pickleball drills. Think about tennis drills. Think about what you're doing with Mike out on the courts, Senior out on the courts. You're trying to improve your play, but you're also improving your stability. When we talk about stability, it doesn't have to be a huge designated amount of time. 10 minutes or so, 2 to 3 times per week, is going to cover most of the decline that we see stability related across the aging process. And just as that visual explanation, our x-axis is age, our y-axis is how quickly the decline happens. We see that balance in this circumstance is being represented, starts the earliest, has that most considerable decline. Strength. Strength is what allows you to get up out of a chair, carry your groceries in, place that luggage up and overhead, as long as you have the shoulder mobility to do so. And our primary way of improving strength is through resistance training. Resistance training is synonymous with dumbbells, but it can also be barbells, it can be kettlebells. To an extent, it can be body weight. I know TRX is a very, very popular thing here. All of those are different variations of resistance training, but they need to be purposeful. We cannot continue to do what we've always done. It doesn't add enough stress or load to the joints and ligaments. We have to continue to push the challenge so that we continue to see the results. And this is what requires something called the progressive overload principle. So usually with progressive overload principles, for those of you who are in the audience who heard the lecture earlier this week, we usually work in what's called macro cycles and micro cycles, where we incorporate rest breaks into our lifestyle so that we can work really, really hard, allow the body a little bit of a step back recovery, work the body really, really hard, allow a step back recovery. And this is a great way to continue to see improvement and also decrease the likelihood of injury. We do not need to work very, very hard 365 days out of the year, but 365 days out from now, you should be doing more than you were the previous. Strength does naturally begin to decline around age 25, actually earlier for men than it does for women. And strength and power are also very important to call out because they're not synonymous. Power begins to decline earlier. Strength actually starts to decline a little bit later. Power is your ability to generate quick, rapid force. If you are somebody who considers yourself a very strong individual, but has at some point in time not had the ability to loosen a screw or open a jar or turn a can, something to that effect, that's because you have lost that or have seen a decrease in power. You see many, many older individuals, much older than in this room. They might still be able to get up out of a chair independently, but that movement is really, really slow. So they've maintained strength, but they have very little power. So the training that they should be focusing a little bit more on is that quick, rapid, explosive movement. It's one thing to get up out of a chair 10 times in a row. It's an entirely different thing to get up out of a chair 10 times fast. You try it, you'll see exactly what I'm referring to. Aerobic performance. So aerobic performance is repetitive actions that you can do for a very long window of time. Depending on the intensity of it, it's going to determine whether or not we're using fat for fuel, carbohydrate for fuel, and that blended combination of the two. Light fatiguing movements, walking, cycling, swimming, we don't usually see tennis, pickleball, golf, those sort of things incorporated here because it doesn't maintain that higher or moderate heart rate for a long enough duration of time. That's going to be more of what we see in an anaerobic environment. So, aerobic performance supports your heart health, endurance, and daily energy. Usually the more established your aerobic base is, the more economical you are with using energy. And this is where we see that zone 1, zone 2, 3, 4, and 5 pictorial on the right-hand side. There is a very easy way to understand where a zone 2 or a zone 3 might be for you using something called the Carvonen method. It's a very rough estimate. We probably all have watches on right now that give us a better idea. But essentially you take 220 minus your age and you use that number as a percentage point of reference. So 60 to 70% of that 220 minus your age is going to be roughly that zone 2 to zone 3 window. It's a lower heart rate than you expect, something that I'm sure would feel easy. But that easy is what's, again, helping to support heart health and that baseline, that foundation of all the other aerobic and anaerobic activities that you look to do. By contrast, we have anaerobic performance. Very, very high levels of exertion for shorter windows of time. So a pickleball set, a tennis set, that might take a maximum of what? I think a long one would be 1 to 2 minutes. During that one, that's a long set. It's probably uncommon to even see it at that duration. But you're working at a very high level of effort, a lot of power output in that window of time. So it's important to incorporate other trainings to help support that. Jumping, sprinting, weightlifting, when you focus on the speed of the movement. So this is where we can stand up out of a chair 10 times or we can stand up out of a chair 10 times fast. That fast portion would be more equative with anaerobic training. Zone 4, zone 5 heart rate, 80 to 90% would be that target window. Again, using that same formula of 220 minus your age times 0.8 times 0.9, somewhere in that window. So let's talk about measuring improvements over time. We have this framework. We know how we're supposed to train. Now, how do we know that we're moving the needle in the right direction? With stability, we can measure joint angles. We can measure improvements in range of motion. If you've had a shoulder surgery or a knee surgery or a hip surgery, you've probably seen this instrument here. It's kind of a little lighter than I thought it was going to be. That's a goniometer, measures joint angle. They usually want you to see you at a certain degree post hip, post knee, post shoulder. Even if we're not going through rehab, it's still a great tool to use. We want to maintain that ability to do that overhead position, locked out, over the lifespan. Let's measure on an occasional basis, and if something is changing, if we're seeing that decrease, what's driving that decrease? Is it overuse? Is it because we're not training flexibility? Is it because we're not training mobility? And let's put a plan in place before it continues to get worse. There's something called the functional movement screen that we can do to also give you, the functional movement screen is a battery of tests. It gives you a numeric value based on how you perform on each of those subcomponents. Say your end score is a 30. We put a plan in place to try to work on improving your mobility. Next time around, you score a 33. We know the program is working. We want to keep seeing the program working, so we continue to reinforce that training style. And of course, there's balance assessments. The most basic of it, most people, if you have a concierge physician, I know they do love to do the 6 foot up and go, which is standing up out of a chair, usually walk up and around a cone placed about 6 feet away, back to the chair and sit down for time. It's a great way to measure dynamic balance, speed, anaerobic capacity. They also do a lot of that single-legged support. Stand on one foot for me for 30 seconds, now try to do it with your eyes closed. They usually write that number down over time. There are more advanced assessments of that, but at a bare minimum, this is something any one of us in the room can get a baseline for. It's good to do that at any point in time, maybe once a year. Continue to work on it because we want to be able to continue to do that. Measurements for strength and power. There's really there's many great ways. Well, we're focusing on 3 today. We can get in the gym and we can focus on repetition max. As you get a little older, a repetition max gets less important for a single rep. We usually change it where what is the maximum amount of force that you can press, push, pull, lift for between 3 and 5 repetitions. It's still something that we can test and then retest in the future. But what we do by instead of doing one lift as heavy as possible, by doing somewhere in the 3 to 5 repetition range, we decrease the likelihood of injury. And we still get a very, very good baseline or retest of where we are strength-wise. Hand grip strength. Hand grip strength has gotten a lot of attention in recent years because of its predictive nature, overall health. Hand grip strength, it's that tool on the right-hand side. Again, many of them look a little bit different, and you are just squeezing that sucker as hard as you can, and it spits you out a number. And that number has a direct correlation with how long they believe you're going to live. And this is very, very tried and true. Many studies over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years have released information based on this, and it's something that anybody can do. And this is where power comes into play, because we know that those who lack power are going to die younger than those who are not able to generate power. So this is just measuring one movement. You grip it as hard as you can. It gives you a number. We work on some power movements. We retest it down the road. Measuring improvements over time, aerobic and anaerobic capacity. We can look at VO2 max. VO2 max is a measurement of milliliters of oxygen that you can consume based on how much you weigh. It's measured in milliliters per kilogram per minute. Lighter athletes usually have a skewed increase in VO2 over heavier athletes just by nature of the formula and it having an incorporation of weight. But it is a very effective way, and I know this is very small, of giving you both your chronological age and your biological age. Biological age being much more important. You can be 80 years old, but you can be a very young 80-year-old. You can have that VO2 max of a 65-year-old. And we can train towards that. I recommend for anyone in this room, do a VO2 max once a year. Establish your baseline. Test it. Make sure that your training is working so that you can continue to support all those goals that we spoke about at the start. There's also the concept of the triangle of consideration that I want everyone in this room to have a good understanding of. So we talk about aerobic and we talk about anaerobic. How much time should I dedicate to training in each? It's not about training for one, it's not about training for the other, it's about expanding the triangle. We don't want to just expand the base of the triangle and have a very, very good aerobic capacity. We also want to expand upward the peak of the triangle. That's where your VO2 is located, so that we can work at a high level of exertion. We want that triangle to move in all directions. But much like a triangle, that bottom covers a lot more area because we should spend a lot more time focusing on aerobic and much less time dedicating training to anaerobic. That's because during anaerobic training, your risk of injury increases, your risk of burning out your central nervous system increases, it's uncomfortable. So when we talk about time duration in each, about 80% of our effort during the week should be focused more in that anaerobic world, and about 20% of our training should be focused into that anaerobic world. So much less time can be spent in that comfortable area than in that high area. And this is, again, that common misnomer of we need to go 100% all the time. Untrue. Enjoy your exercise. It doesn't always have to feel like you got hit by a bus after you leave the gym. And then finally, body composition, because along with all of these changes that we're making training-wise, we would hope that it reflects a little bit in how we look, feel, and what measurements are telling us about what's going on inside of our body, primarily with fat mass versus fat-free mass, visceral fat, bone mineral density, and one great way to do this is getting a DEXA scan. DEXA scan, again, I'm sorry that the image is smaller and a little bit harder to read, but a DEXA scan costs about $100. I try to do mine once a year, right up at Radiology Regional off Corkscrew Road. You go in and it's literally just to scan your body. It's painless, it's quick, it's easy, but you get all these metrics about where are you carrying your fat? Where are you carrying your lean mass? What are the percentages? And it's much, much more reliable than a scale that you likely have in your bathroom that uses something called electrical impedance analysis to do that measurement, which is very skewed based on your hydration status. Electrical impedance analysis, you go on it with your bare feet, it sends a very, very small signal of electricity through your body based on how hydrated or dehydrated you are. That can skew the results tremendously.
How about the newer scans that they actually hold with hands? One of them is called Hume, and it's called the Body Pod, and we almost do it religiously every day, but what you're looking for is a pattern as opposed to one individual day. And it came pretty close to our doctor's
DEXA scan.
Yeah.
So the Body Pod for us is the more
And that's,
and then you can measure it.
and that's what I think is most important, is that you hit the nail on the head of consistency. Of if that's the tool that you're relying on, you know the time of day, your hydration status is not going to change too much day in to day out. So as long as you continue to measure that way, it's going to be a good indicator. In my own experience, this is going back a couple years. When I first did my DEXA scan, I was in a very dehydrated state, and I did a DEXA scan immediately into a very similar one called an in-body scan. The stand-up's a $15,000 machine. The in-body scan had me at about 5% less body fat than the DEXA. So that really just shows how much hydration plays a role into it. But I went into that knowing I was very dehydrated for the purpose of seeing how different it was going to be.
When I play golf, I get dehydrated, so I know automatically the next morning it'll show that I've gained weight, and in reality it comes down. So we measure at the same time every morning.
Yep. But it's great. The tools that are at home are getting better and better. Even talking about VO2 max, most Apple Watches or Garmin or Fitbit, whatever you happen to be, or the Oura rings, as long as you use them consistently and the parameters are relatively the same, you get a lot of good data. And if you ever need help interpreting that, I love this stuff. I'll sit and look at numbers all day long with you and help point you in what direction I believe is the most appropriate. But whether you're using a scale at home, whether you consider doing something like a DEXA scan, it's great to have that point of reference.
What's the name of the scale you use?
It's called Hume, Hume, and it's their body pod. And you hold the hands, it's about a couple $100. And every morning you get on it, and then on your Apple Watch or your phone, it'll track it over a period of time. And because we've been losing weight over the last year, it's tracked everything. What I'm most worried about is my lean muscle mass. I want to make sure that I'm not losing, because with these kind of drugs, you can lose muscle more than you can lose fat. And so it's been pretty accurate. And then we go back to the doctor and I compare the readings I've been generally getting with his big machine.
Oh, we've got a question in the back.
With the DEXA scan, it sounds like you go to a radiology facility to get that scan?
Yeah, so it's called DEXA, it's kind of, it's weird. It's called DEXA Fit, but they operate out of Radiology Regional off of Corkscrew Road, so you don't need a prescription for it. It's something that you can sign up and do online, and it's just like $75 to $100. You go in, no insurance, they take you into the back, it's very professionally done, professional setting, and you get some great data.
Do you know what they're scanning you with?
It's an X-ray.
It's actually the machine.
Yeah.
What I mean, is it
It's really just not what we get.
radiation?
Yeah, so you'll get, again, it's very small, like you get an actual X-ray of your skeleton that shows where your fat and fat-free mass distribution is, granular to the point of knowing how much muscle mass you have on your right leg comparatively to your left leg, your right arm versus your left arm. So many people probably have noticed, oh, I have one stronger leg. It's probably going to show on this test that you have a little bit more muscle mass. Mine, for example, is about...
Same thing, it'll
Yeah.
show that where you have more fat, where you have more muscle, the same thing. The thing I'm most interested in is visceral fat.
Yep. So visceral fat is the fat that's around your organs. We want that to maintain probably, I believe, somewhere between 0.6 and 0.8 pounds total. Once you see north of that 0.8 pound range, that's where we see health complications occur. A lot of information. So kind of where to begin? What do you currently do that would change your life if you could no longer do it? Now, this is a deep-rooted question. I can no longer golf. Uh-oh. Can no longer garden. We do have some nice homes, nice large yards here, nice yards up north if you're somebody who likes to grow. You can no longer drive. You can no longer travel. This is where your training should start. So when we talk about some of these examples of, if I can no longer drive, what does that mean? What would potentially cause me to not be able to drive? Usually that's mobility related or stability related. I'm no longer comfortable. Most cars have cameras in them now, but I know I still want to be able to rotate and look over my shoulder. If you're somebody in a fixed position who can no longer rotate their head, you're probably going to have a family member pretty quickly tell you, I think it's time to give away the keys. If you're somebody who can no longer golf, this is multifactorial. Is it a lower body issue? Is it a stability issue? Is it a mobility issue? We got to tackle a lot of different areas in which to be able to maintain doing those things, in addition to your aerobic and anaerobic health. So this is kind of the QA portion. I know I gave you a lot of heavy stuff to think about, a lot of different information about training styles and methodologies. I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, or in your own practice, if you want to share what you're doing now and maybe what do I need to change effectively?
One of my concerns is, you can push yourself hard, we keep pushing to go for higher and higher, but I really am afraid of hurting myself one way or the other, because at our ages, that recovery time means everything else atrophies in the meantime. We atrophy so much quicker. I can lay off for 3 or 4 days and then try to go back, and I realize even in 3 or 4 days sometimes you've lost some kind of stamina or power or whatever else. So we haven't addressed the hurt part in here as much. If you hurt yourself, how do you prevent yourself from hurting yourself?
Usually there's a previous indicator of something happening before you hurt yourself. A lot of it is just having that good internal messaging of knowing, all right, my hip's been hurting. Is this a hip hurt issue that I can push through? Or is this a hip hurt that has been lasting for 2 or 3 weeks? Is this getting progressively worse? Has this now radiated to another part of my body? Generally, we need to have 1, just good awareness. 2, the understanding that it's okay to rest and building in rest to your schedule. I'm laughing because there was some good conversation the other day about this one. Because if you don't build in the rest, your body's going to find time that forces you to rest. When we talk about proper progressions with strength training or aerobic training, my approach has always been to do block scheduling, where you might work progressively more challenging for about 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks, and then take 1 week as a taper back, so that you're still moving, you're still getting into the gym, but we're reducing the amount of weight that we're moving on the machines, or maybe reducing the amount of sets or repetitions that we're doing, so that we can go into a rebuild, then another chain of 4 to 5 weeks of progression, 1 week back, 4 forward, 1 back. And then over that course of time, we greatly reduce the chance of injury because we're giving the body what it inevitably is going to seek out on its own, and that's rest.
I think the biggest mistake most of us make, I see a few people in the gym that I recognize. I mean, you get into a routine and you're comfortable with that routine. What I heard you say today, you've actually got to step out of that comfort zone.
Yep.
And how to do that safely.
How to step out of the comfort zone safely. That's use the resources around you. We've got a great team of professionals here, myself included. If you're somebody who's been doing the same training program for a very long time and you're just not seeing the results that you want, or if you need suggestions, very happy.
Christine was very helpful with this, but I sit on a bicycle next to this lady. We kind of go through the same thing every time.
Yeah, and it almost is. It feels like the definition, it's the, well, here we go again comments.
Is that true?
Yeah. And it's being, you're aware of it. That's step 1.
Yeah.
And now the next step would be, let's put a plan together. And step 3 is we need to execute on that plan. But it's also a real opportunity because most of us in this room have done no sort of reflection or measurement or goal setting in this area before. So this is where I would encourage you. Go home and think about it. What do I want to continue to be able to do? What is my Centenarian Decathlon? Bring it back. Let's talk about it. Let's put a plan together. And nothing, if you're not changing anything on the bike right now, the changes can be so subtle to move the needle in the right direction that it's going to be hardly noticeable. If it's, all right, I'm used to cycling at 75 RPMs, I'm going to start cycling at 77 RPMs. Not even going to notice it.
Kind of change.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, but small incremental change.
Very small.
I don't know how many of us are on heart medications, blood pressure medications, but there's something called metoprolol. Metropolo controls the amount that they'll let you, your heart won't be able to get above a certain amount of beats. So as a young man, I could get it up to 150, 160 or something like that. And I like the rowing machine a lot because I can get my heart rate up. But with Metropolo, sometimes it'll sit there 70, 80, 90 beats, and I'm pulling away pretty hard at it. That affects my VO2 max on my watch. I've never done the other one because I'm on Metropolo, and I'm not sure what it would be measuring if I'm on Metropolo.
I'll give two comments. One, it's a great point to raise up. Two, for individuals who are on a heart rate blunting medication or something that suppresses your heart rate response, we usually encourage the RPE scale instead. So the RPE scale is rate of perceived exhaustion, and it goes from 1 to 10, or depending on who you talk to, 4 to 16. Working zone 2 or zone 3 would be an effort level of around a 6. Zone 4 to 5 would be that 8 to 9 range. So finding yourself and having honest internal dialogue of how hard am I really working, and equate it to one of those two numbers. The other comment I'll give is because a standard VO2 max is measuring direct oxygen consumption through respiration, it's going to give you better data than heart rate alone.
Okay.
So you actually get a decent number.
I think I asked you this question earlier this year, but I'm having a hard time with rest days. And for some people, a rest day maybe mean walking briskly for an hour, as opposed, or is rest day you're talking about like complete rest?
That's a great question. Rest days are probably going to look different for each individual, but it is going to be a significantly lower level of activity day. It doesn't mean lay on the couch and do nothing. It means I'm probably not going to elevate my heart rate much above that zone 1 or zone 2 for a very short window of time. So if I'm going to go out and walk around the Corso, and I can hold a conversation with my spouse or a friend, that's probably about as hard as I want to exert myself on a true rest day. It's okay to move, and it's okay to focus on doing something more recreational. If it's riding a bike, if it's I'm gonna go to the basketball court and just shoot some hoops for a minute. So if I'm just gonna go through some repetition using the ball machine, but at a very low level of intensity, just be mindful of your heart rate being in that conversational level.
My golf days are rest days.
Golf day is a true rest day. Golf day is a true rest day with an asterisk. Make sure it's really going to depend on, because you're still exposing yourself to heat. So heat can cause its own level of exhaustion, but as far as aerobic or anaerobic or strength response, none of those are being tremendously taxed. We're taking some swings and we're putting some power output, but it shouldn't affect you too much in the gym as long as you're hydrating appropriately.
I have a question. You mentioned nervous system burnout. What are the symptoms of that? If you're overtraining, like how would you know besides other things? Like what would that be?
So central nervous system burnout, what are the signs and symptoms of it? Poor performance. The weights just feel heavier in the gym than they usually do. If you are somebody who tracks measurements, if you track your heart rate at rest is more elevated than it usually is. We're retaining a little bit more weight if we're doing daily measurements, and it's like, hey, I've changed nothing, but I'm 2 pounds heavier this week than I was last week. Combination of any of those. General lethargy, just low energy, and I think the most important one to be mindful of is I don't want to do what I like to do, which is exercise or activity. If you dread going out for a run, but you love to run, let's look at your training.
Another thing, I did the VO2 max, and the number I got on there was very different
Yeah.
And he asked me when I started, I couldn't remember what my Apple Watch was, but he said you might find it's completely different. He said because it depends on how active a person you are, what types of activities. He said it'll kind of skew because it's measuring all the time.
Exactly.
So it might skew your numbers.
Yeah.
It was
Mine's
completely
pretty
different.
low.
Yeah.
on my watch.
Yeah, mine is low, and on the measurement one, it was way higher.
For a point of reference, I have never been less fit based on my Garmin as when I've done my Ironmans. And that's because it doesn't know how to differentiate intensity when you're doing so much volume and so many different activities, and it does invariably give you a lower number than what the true number is. So for me, I've learned to, which kind of sucks, to be selective with when I actually record activities because I want it to be a better predictor of where I'm at. So if I'm gonna take an evening walk after dinner, I'm probably not gonna track that walk because I know it's gonna tell you that I'm detraining and poor performance.
Right.
It's like, man, all I wanna do is go for a walk.
He said the lower intensity activities, if you do, it's like if you just happen to be doing a lot of long walking, but that's not your real, for your level, real training. He
Correct.
said it'll really skew your numbers.
Yep.
So, all those walks where I haven't tracked it, it's basically I shouldn't be doing it. 'Cause I never have it tracked my pickleball, I never have it tracked during a lot of other things which are much more higher intensity.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
because in pickleball, it pauses when you're between games, and then I always forget to reset.
Exactly.
not
It's
really-
again, it's a very, they haven't developed something that is smart enough to know when you're actually on the court and off the court without having to have that human variable of
Yeah,
hitting a
pressing
button.
the It also doesn't have roughing on it, which
Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Thanks, Robert.
So we are, thank you. We're approaching, actually this is the final lecture that I have planned for this calendar season. If you have anything else that you're interested in learning a little bit more about as it relates to longevity, health, wellness, anything of that regard, feel free to bring it to my attention. My summer is usually when I spend planning these myself, and also finding what experts in the area might be interested in coming in and sharing a little bit of time with Mediterra. So always open to feedback. Thank you all.